Everybody ready? Well, good morning. We got some needed rain over the weekend. Um, we're joined this morning by the Iowa Newspaper Association Executive Director, Chris Mudge. About a month ago, I had the opportunity to meet with Chris. At that meeting, she told me about the Wall of Faces. The Wall of Faces is an effort by the Vietnam Memorial Fund to display a picture of every fallen soldier from the Vietnam War. Like many Iowans, I've seen the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C., and of course, we have a similar wall here on the Capitol grounds. And I've been moved by seeing the names of each soldier who made the ultimate sacrifice etched in the stone. I believe that the Wall of Faces, in which you will see the face behind the name, is equally as powerful. The Wall of Faces Memorial is available online. However, as Chris told me, there were some soldiers whose photos were not available and had not been located. Of the Iowans who served and were killed in the line of duty in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, only one soldier's photo is still missing. The soldier is David L. McCombs of Oskaloosa, Iowa. As a Vietnam-era veteran and the governor of Iowa, I want to ensure that every Iowan who made the ultimate sacrifice for our nation is recognized and honored. It's my hope that Iowans will hear this call to action and assist us in finding a photo of David L. McCombs. And now I would welcome Lieutenant Governor Reynolds to the podium.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Governor Branstad, and thank you, Chris, for joining us and bringing this important issue to our attention. According to the National Archives, 851 Iowans made the ultimate sacrifice in the line of duty during the Vietnam War. It's remarkable that only one photo, that of David L. McCombs, has not been located or obtained. I think that speaks to in part to Iowans' desire to honor and recognize our nation's veterans. With Memorial Day just about a month away on May 25th, the governor and I are asking for Iowans and maybe even those beyond Iowa's borders to help us locate the last Iowa soldier's photo for this powerful memorial. The Iowa Department of Veterans Affairs has been working diligently to search federal, state, and local community records and archives, but has not been able to find a lead needed to locate the photo of David L. McComb. It is our hope that an individual will hear about this call to action and assist us in this effort. If someone knows of David L. McCombs or his family, please contact the Iowa Department of Veterans Affairs. It's extremely important so he can be included and honored in this memorial. And now it's my pleasure to bring to the podium Chris Mudge.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Governor Branstad and Lieutenant Governor Reynolds, for drawing this attention to Iowans. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund is a nonprofit organization which was formed by Congress in 1980 for the purpose of building the national monument, which we all know as the Wall, which recognizes all of the those soldiers who, as Lieutenant Governor Reynolds mentioned, gave the ultimate sacrifice and gave their lives in the Vietnam War. The memorial itself is one of the most visited memorials in Washington, D.C., with about 4.5 million people visiting it annually. The fund's latest initiative is a campaign to build an education center that will be next to the wall. The education center will show pictures and tell the stories of those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Unfortunately, the fund is missing many photos of these brave soldiers. So the fund launched the Faces Never Forgotten project. The campaign is an effort to engage the public and find a photo of each of these soldiers who gave their lives. All photos and stories that are collected will be featured in the Education Center and shared on the Vietnam Veteran Memorial's virtual Wall of Faces, which again you can see online. So newspapers and newspaper associations have assisted with this project by sharing stories and information about these men and women on the pages of newspapers all across the country. As the Lieutenant Governor and Governor mentioned, Iowa lost 851 soldiers in the Vietnam War. When newspapers across the state started publicizing this effort in May of 2014, there were 47 Vietnam vets from Iowa with missing photos. We have located all but one. David Leroy McCombs served in the Army. He died on October 11th, 1969 at the age of 26. He was from Tuscaloosa. We hope to find a picture of David so it can be placed next to his 850 comrades from our great state who, along with David, made the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you.
Chris, thank you very much. We'd open it for questions on this subject first.
Do you have any other information about them, like graduate from Tuscaloosa High School, that just moved there to Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, the only additional information that we have is that his last known address was in California. It's as the governor and lieutenant governor mentioned, the Veterans Memorial or the Veterans Affairs Administration, as well as the newspapers, have been trying to locate him. That is the only additional information that I can provide.
Yes, you know, as you probably aware, a lot of people who are attributed to Iowa, we find out really are Iowa. This guy actually not Iowa, because so many people, you know, and it just happened as there was one guy who died in the Iraq War who lived in Davenport for 3 weeks and he signed up as the recruiting officer, so he was listed as an Iowan when he was chosen.
Well, according to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, his hometown is Oskaloosa.
The military say photo IDs whenever you
Sorry.
It's all right. Go ahead.
I apologize, Governor. Actually, what happened, and I don't know very many facts behind this, so that's why I didn't mention it, but at some point there was a fire somewhere, and a lot of these, okay, there you go. You know better than I do. So that is why many of the photos are missing.
Yeah, I have a photo. Yeah. In fact, I was telling Chris, Doug Melvold, who was the editor of the newspaper in Macokota, I guess just recently sold it. He and I were drafted together on September 17th, 1989, and went down to 1969. We were drafted together September 17, 1969, went down to Fort Polk, Louisiana. And so we both witnessed each other getting their head shaved. So, and we've kind of stayed in touch through the years, and his family just sold the newspaper in Macokota. But yeah, that was an era, of course, when we did have the draft as well. They're there. They're there. There's actually one other one from Iowa where we've located it, but we don't have the photo yet. So if you go online, you'll see two, but the one is located. It's just that they're working with the family to try to get the photo.
Excuse me. You may actually see three. I don't know if we have sent a photo of one of the gentlemen. There is two. Okay, thank you, Jimmy. Jimmy says there's only two.
So I think when Chris originally talked to me about this, there were like 47.
When we first started, there were 47.
Yeah, so they've come a long ways. Iowa Newspaper Association's done a great job with this, and we're just appealing to the public. If anybody has any information about this, we'd like to be able to say that Iowa did a great job, and we got every one of them identified that is considered an Iowan that's on the wall. We don't know. And there are McCombs that live in Oskaloosa, but they're not related as far as we know.
There's no information as to when he graduated.
No, and I think they've checked that out, and they don't have information about school pictures or when he graduated or that sort of thing. Okay. So Jimmy says there's a birth certificate, but no school records. Department of Veterans Affairs. So they should contact the Iowa Department of Veterans Affairs. And, or they can contact the governor's office and the newspaper association, but the Iowa Department of Veterans Affairs is leading this effort.
This must be all over the Oskaloosa.
Well, the Oskaloosa paper is aware of it. I don't know for sure, and I should if they've done anything in the past, but I do know that Jimmy has told me that they are going to follow up with this following this press conference. So I have been in touch with them.
Other questions? Okay, other on this subject or another other. Okay. We're at a critical point in this session when the House and the Senate need to diligently work on the budget. You know, I presented a budget, a 2-year biennial budget on the second day of the legislative session. And we're just now beginning to see movement on this. We'll see appropriation bills being debated. But I think it's important that they pass a 2-year budget that's sustainable for the long term. And we're going to work with both House and Senate to try to resolve the differences.
Last week, there was a stalemate on the gas tax.
Right. Yep.
Everybody came together to try to reach a consensus. We asked Paulson last week if he had done that in terms of the stalemate on education funding, but he said no. Why haven't you done that?
We've had numerous discussions with both the House and Senate on this issue, and we're going to continue to have. If at some point we think a meeting like that would be fruitful, I'm certainly willing to do that. I think we had 5 different meetings with the leadership in both House and the Senate as we worked on the road use tax fund issue. That has been resolved. The school start date, both of these have been difficult issues over a long period of time that have been resolved. But now we need to, and this is not new, and this is something that comes up every year, or I would hope only every other year when we're passing a biennial budget, that we can resolve this and not have to go through this fight again next year. I did present my recommendations for supplemental state aid and additional funding for K through 12 public education on the second day of the session. It totals $250 million. That's $250 million. And that's over, I think it's about 55% of the new money that's available. In light of the financial circumstances we're facing because farm values are dropping and USDA is estimating farm income is going to be down 32%, we've got to be careful in terms of the level of spending. But certainly I want to see that, and you know, we're moving forward on the teacher leadership and the funding for the stipends for high achievers that go into teaching. I've already signed a bill on having AmeriCorps involved in helping with the reading of kids that are struggling with reading, and we're funding the Reading Resource Center and STEM. So there's a lot we're doing. We just that we do need to get these things resolved, and I think the sooner the better.
But in light of, since this has taken forever, and because of the chaos it causes school administrators who have already had to certify their budget, why can't, to Bill's point, why can't it be as simple as you, Paulson, and Branstad sit in the room and just figure it out now they feel it's done?
Well, first of all, I think you need to know that this is the biggest item in the budget, and the House and the Senate are way apart in terms of the level of spending. And obviously, we don't know the details. The details of the budget that I recommended have been available since January, but we don't know the details of either the House or Senate plans. And so we're presently meeting with, David Roeder's had several meetings with them to try to find that out, but they're just now getting down to that. And that's the problem. I think that it took a long time. And I think they were thinking that maybe the March revenue estimate would be better. Well, it wasn't. It was $19 million less than the December revenue estimate.
Governor, are we possibly looking at a government shutdown on July 1 if they can't reach, because they are very, very far apart?
Well, I know, but we've been through this before, and we've been through tougher times than this. I was governor during the farm crisis of the 80s, and we've always resolved these things before we get to the end of the fiscal year. Unlike the federal government, unlike some other states, in Iowa, we've always done it. No, I don't see a government shutdown, and I see every reason to believe that we're going to be able to get these things resolved. I just think it's time to get serious about it and get the job done.
But what do you see as your role?
My role is, first of all, my role is to submit a budget for the biennium that is sustainable over the 5 years. I did that back in January.
Right, what have you done since then to resolve this conflict?
Well, first of all, we haven't even known where they were or what their recommendation. They just last week came out with their budget targets.
Democrats, not the Republicans.
Well, yeah, and the Republicans the same way. So we are just now learning what the details of their recommendations are and where that is in conflict with what we've recommended. And so we need to analyze and review that and then determine where we might be able to compromise and where we think as a matter of principle, we need to make sure that our budget recommendations are the ones approved. Now, let me point out from my long years of experience, sometimes legislators will say, well, we cut the governor's budget by X amount by just slashing how much money is going to Medicaid, knowing full well that in the next fiscal year, they're just pushing that burden into another fiscal year. That's bad budgeting practices. I've seen that before. We're not going to let them go that direction because we think that would be wrong. We're embarking on this approach towards delivering Medicaid, managed care for Medicaid, something that I think 20 some other states have done. Over half the Medicaid population is under a managed care system. We've put RFPs out and we started planning this in January. It doesn't take effect until January of next year. We estimate that this can, in addition to providing better services and help keep people stay healthier, that it can save $51 million. My concern is that legislators will decide, well, instead of $51 million, it's going to be 100. And so then they'll just count that. And so we want this to be honest and realistic. And there's a lot of things like that in the budget that need to be resolved. And I guess I want to make sure that what we're doing is sustainable. Because I came back as governor for the very reason this wasn't being done by the previous administration. They were using one-time money for ongoing expenses. They were making promises they couldn't keep, which led to the 10% across the board cut in school aid and other things in 2009, underfunding the school aid budget in 2010. So the first thing we had to do is restore stability and predictability. And we did that. And now we got the state on the right track, and I want to keep it that way.
Governor, are we going to be asking you the same questions a week from now, or are there supposed to be very concrete developments that we can expect this week?
Well, I being realistic, I don't expect this thing's going to get resolved in the next week. I hope it can be resolved in the next month. That's what I'd like to see done. But even that is an ambitious schedule in light of the fact they're just getting serious about this now.
We're talking about mid-May.
Well, I would hope it could be completed before the end of May.
So then by that point, the schools are done, so they've certified their budgets already, they've sent out the layout notices by the 30th, so then won't that be, come in May and give them the numbers?
Well, they've dealt with these things before, and they've dealt with all kinds of uncertainty between the year 2002 and 2010. I think 6 times the legislature or the governor changed the budget during the school year and cut across the board or whatever. So schools have been through this again and again. That's the reason why I believe in a 2-year budget and setting supplemental state aid for both years, not only for this year, but for fiscal year 2016, but for fiscal year 2016 and 17. So we have that stability and predictability. And what I've told the school officials that have been in touch with me, I believe they will get at least what I've recommended. So I think they can rely on the level that we've recommended. And that's what I would recommend that they go forward on, knowing full well, eventually the legislature is going to have to come to an agreement on this issue.
Just to clarify what you were saying before, so you anticipate that the session will be over by the end of May?
My hope is it can be over by the end of May. I am never going to try to predict the day the legislature adjourns. They are a separate branch of government, but I want to do all I can to assist and facilitate their getting their work done in a timely way. I did that by submitting a biennial budget on the second day of the session. The law does not require that. The law requires that the governor submit the budget by the end of January. It doesn't also require that we have a biennial budget, but that is better planning and makes more sense. And that's what and we've been able to get most of the budget done on a biennial basis. I'm hopeful this year the entire budget can be done on a biennial basis, so we don't have this annual food fight over the level of spending.
Governor, given some of the controversial decisions made at the Iowa Law Enforcement Academy regarding sexual harassment policy, it appears that your nominee to lead that agency may not be confirmed by the Senate. Are you staying behind this nomination? Are you talking with senators about this work?
We have been working with the Senate on this matter. And it just so happens that Arlen Sianowski was on a cruise and unavailable when this came up right at the deadline. And Senator Gronstal then agreed to delay a decision on this. I believe that Arlen should be given the opportunity to respond to the accusations that have been made. I would point out that the deputy director who was a problem there was fired. Was fired as soon as the law was changed that gave us the authority that made him an at-will employee, and that was done last summer. So if there are other issues, I want to make sure that the senators that have concerns have an opportunity to have a conversation with Arlen Sianowski. Private. Well, first of all, I guess it's up to the individuals how they want to do this, but I guess individual senators that have concerns ought to be able to have the opportunity to have the conversation with the individual. And I guess generally those things are done on in a private basis.
You said on your radio call-in show on the agenda today that you're not going to spend one-time money for ongoing expenses.
Right.
But the budget was presented, the presentation we got in this room the second day of the session was that it required $129 million of one-time surplus money to make your budget.
That's different. No, wait a minute. That's surplus money as opposed to one-time money.
Why is it surplus one-time?
Well, first of all, you go way back to 1986 when we passed the spending limitations. It's 99%. And when we say, first of all, we have filled the cash reserve and economic emergency account. That's 10%. That's done. And then we have money over and above that. And under the spending limitations, that's looked at as considered money that's available to be spent over the period of time. And we put together a 5-year budget and show that our level of spending, and when we passed in 2013, education reform and property tax relief, we knew that was going to require additional money in out years, $50 million more every year to fund the additional students, additional school districts to get the benefit of the teacher leadership money. And there's also additional money to fund the property tax relief to assure that local governments their property taxes are replaced with state dollars.
Have you talked to House Republicans about this? Because
Yes.
they consider surplus money one-time money that they won't spend for ongoing expenses. That's why they say there's only $180 million available for budgeting in this next cycle.
We have shared our views on this many times over the years. My view is we put together a biennial budget, a 2-year budget with 5-year projections, and we want to make sure that it's sustainable over the long term. We know there are some years like this year with farm income down when it's going to be a little more difficult. In other years, like in the past when farm income was way up and we had high prices for commodities, that revenues are going to exceed expectations. but we don't take a 1 year view of things. We look at it over a 5 year period and what we have is sustainable over that period of time. And it continues to maintain the entire cash reserve and economic emergency account.
But that's the essence of this impasse that they've got upstairs, and you're saying you'd like to see them resolve it. The only way they're gonna resolve it is to clarify whether that's in or out.
Well, we're going to continue to work with them, and I do understand their viewpoint. We just happen to have a difference of opinion as to how this should be looked at. We happen to believe that we have a sustainable budget that makes sense for the long term and fulfills the commitments we made to education and property tax relief. We also are cognizant that we can't go beyond that in terms of the level of spending, and we're going to have to continue to reduce the size and cost of government in order to make it sustainable.
So why, just tell me again, why is the surplus money not one time?
Well, because it's not, it's money that is there that was built in to the whole spending reforms that we passed in 1986. And so it says we can only spend 99% of available revenue. It is part of the available revenue. We're well below the 99%, but we're not just looking at it from a 1 year perspective, which was the mistake of the past. We are projecting out for 5 years, and we're saying it's sustainable over the 5 year period and continues to make sure that the budget is balanced over that time.
Speaker Paulson wrong when he says that the overpayment of taxes that should be returned to taxpayers?
Well, again, I am interested in working with both the House and the Senate to resolve these things. And I understand that different people have different perspectives, but I've shared with you my perspective and the way we've approached this from the day that I came back as governor. That's why I so strongly believe in a 2 year biannual budget, not making a decision year by year, and not using this one-time money for ongoing expenditures as was done in the past, and not even using it for one-time expenditures, but making sure that what we have is sustainable for the long term.
Given that the city of Clinton has a proposal on the table that uses gas tax money in a way that is probably legal within the law, but maybe goes against the spirit of how, in particular, the increase this year was sold. I just wondered if you had a reaction to using money in that way.
Well, I agree with David Rose, who is on the DOT commission from Clinton, and with the legislators in both the House and the Senate that managed the bill, that this violates the spirit of the legislation that was approved. I think it would be a mistake to use this additional money, which is supposed to go for roads and bridges and for in the city of Clinton or any of the other cities and counties to hire more staff.
Final question, Ron?
I was just looking at the balance sheet that the LSA puts out and the amount of money you're talking about that House Republicans say is off the table and you say should be used, but in a responsible way is $319 million.
Well, and that's not I don't think that's right. David Roeder can give you the information, and the number he shared with us is much different than that.
Joyce has got a little one, so we'll do one last.
Very briefly, along with what Aaron was saying, there's other complaints about using the gas tax money for Highway 20 instead of for.
Oh, wait a minute.
All these pictures we saw, the crumbling bridges and all that.
Wait a minute. Highway 20, my God, it's 30 or 40 years overdue. It's been promised and promised and promised again. And so there was no doubt that in addition to repairing and rebuilding roads and bridges, completing this last segment of 30 some miles of Highway 20 would be part of the priority. And I want to compliment the DOT Commission on moving forward with the purchase of that additional right of way. This will make a huge difference because right now it's actually dangerous. We have trucks that are avoiding Highway 20 because it's 2-lane for that segment, and they're taking Interstate 29 and 80, which are already heavily crowded. So this is a significant improvement. It's been long overdue. It's been promised. And if you go to Sioux City or Northwest Iowa and talk about this issue. They know how critically important it is. And it's only a small portion of the additional projects that they're doing, but it is a critically important one. And it is a link that certainly needs to be completed. We've been working on Highway 20 for, I don't know, 30 years, starting with Dubuque and going west, and then from Mobile going east. And now we have a little segment from Correctionville to Early. And thank God the DOT is going to get that done. I think a lot of people are really appreciative that they're moving forward with that and putting it on the fast track.
Thank you.